Hello there everyone, welcome back to another video about the One Piece card game. Been a little while since I've put something up, been very busy with work, but I managed to get something together. Also, note, if you are one of my patrons or if you're interested in that, it's like a $5 a month, guides will be starting soon. Again, it's been pretty crazy starting a new job, but finally have about enough time to start getting those out, and also some OP04, a lot of OP04 games under my belt, so it's looking like the first one of those guides is going to be Rebecca. That was the Patreon vote, unless it's changed in the time between me last checking and me recording this, which I think I have quite a lot of experience on, so that should be a pretty good one, so I hope you're looking forward to that. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about in this video is this really weird format we're in, because it is actually quite an interesting and unusual format, and there isn't really a good decision by and large, because, you know, a lot of the decisions are basically into soul reading what the rest of the player base is going to do, which isn't really possible. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about a few key decks in the format, basically the ones that I consider to be particularly relevant in the form of a tier list, and then sort of explain exactly why I think they are where they are, and talk about the format. So I guess let's begin by essentially slapping everything that I think is relevant up here. So I don't, to be honest, these are tier 1, tier 2 rogue and scrub. I don't think these are great. I would say this is tier 1 consistent. Oh, is it going to work? It's not going to work. It's going to say CV. There we go. Consistent. And we're going to have tier 1 inconsistent, and then we just have tier 1 less consistent. And then I think Rogue, Scrub, and D is totally accurate. Okay, so let's begin. So tier 1 less consistent for Zoro, tier 1 consistent for Law. And I don't mean consistent just in terms of the deck itself. I mean, there's some macro aspects to that as well in terms of matchups. Other relevant decks, we've got to put Whitebeard up here where he belongs. We got to put Rebecca up here. We got to put Katakuri where it's Katakuri up here. Absolutely, it's got to be up there. And then looking through, Ace definitely belongs in tier 1. Nami belongs in tier 1. But what's going on here? Hello. you guys see this? Oh no, it's just on my screen. Crazy. Okay. It's being very odd right now. We want to put Luffy is pretty good up here. I think that's like probably... Oh, sorry, yeah, Nami here. What is Uta doing here? Wow. You know, my screen really freaked out for a second there. Oh, and of course we've got to put Blue Croc up here in tier 2. And I think that's basically all the relevant decks. If I missed... Oh, right, yes. GP Duffy. Missed that one. Okay, I think that is everything relevant, with a special shout out to, where is he? Magellan, who definitely is a rogue deck. And there's a few others who I can put in there, like, you know, BP Croc and stuff. But, like, I mean, okay, by and large, we're talking about, like, the solidified format, and I would say it's this. And this is weird. I mean, firstly, you know, once again, we're seeing a lot of red in the top. Haha, funny. But I think, you know, it's a lot less egregious this time around. And that's because we have this really interesting triangle format that also plays into the sort of macro decision-making you have to make in a tournament. So what do I mean by that? If you've never been to a major tournament before, almost more important than choosing what deck you're going to take based on its power level is choosing what deck you're going to take based on what you think other people are going to take, what you expect the meta to be. And then there's also decisions in terms of how you make decisions in deck building to plan for that. But, you know, in terms like selecting the leader is almost less important than accurately predicting what you're going to be playing against, because you can see success with a less powerful leader if you have accurately predicted the meta and you've made deck building decisions that you know, account for that. Then, you know, it can matter to a lesser degree what leader you take. And so we're in this really odd situation because I think, unlike every previous triangle meta that we've had in the game, this one, it's unique to me because Katakuri is unequivocally the most powerful deck in the game in terms of ceiling. You know, if you look at what that deck can potentially do if the casino goes in its favor, if you're being hit with thunderbolts like almost every other damage deck, if they're getting last damage blockers, if they're healing, if they're slamming your big dudes into your life and then they're just burning them away with Big Mom, if they're just slamming huge vanillas and you can't answer them and then they're pushing massive numbers to face, they're swinging 7 every single turn, all these sorts of things, right? If you sit down and you actually look at what Katakuri does, it's very difficult to argue with the fact that it probably is the most powerful deck in the game in terms of just raw, like, look at what it does. And yet, it gets absolutely bullied by red. In particular, Law is just unwinnable. It's like, I mean, maybe 80-20 in the favor of Law. Like, you can win, but you need to be seeing basically like 3 Thunderbolts in life, or like, you know, something, the variance needs to be there. Law needs to not really see much gas, which granted can happen. It's a relatively inconsistent deck by nature of sort of what it's doing. Though, I mean, that doesn't detract from the fact that fundamentally what it does is so good that it doesn't matter that it's a little bit inconsistent. It's just very, very difficult. Whitebeard is, even in its significantly nerfed state, a challenging matchup for Katakuri. At best, it's 50-50. At best, right? And that is something you have to bear in mind when you look at meta shares, right? When you look at historical tournament data and you see that Whitebeard is 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40% of what people are taking in. I don't think it's going to be 40, but 20 to 30 seems pretty reasonable. That means in a 9-round event, you're expecting to play it twice. So you're losing 1. Like then and there, right? So immediately I'm taking 1 L to Whitebeard in my expected when I'm running through the numbers, right? Like, okay, what are my matchups? So I'm losing 1 there. Law, again, 30%. So you may play 2 of those. You're losing both. So already I'm X3 as Katakuri, right? Just off these 2 decks. Yes, you absolutely... Rebecca is a really difficult, like, matchup for Rebecca. It's in favor of Katakuri, 100%. The Rebecca player needs to be a fucking god to consistently win, and even then, they're not going to, because fundamentally the matchup is very disadvantageous. So that's something to bear in mind. You will be slamming blue croc players, you'll be abusing them. You're pretty consistently beating GP Doflamingo. I think there's a really pretty mid deck. This isn't in order, by the way. You definitely are beating Nami, but you're losing to Ace for sure, and you're probably losing to Zoro as well. Or at best, again, they're 50-50, right? So you have this sort of situation where you are getting completely abused by red. And there's 4 really good red decks. I mean, 2 really, really good ones and 2 pretty good ones. And the really interesting thing about the red decks in this particular format is they also have different matchups into different other leaders, right? This isn't the homogeneity we saw in previous formats when, okay, well, red just does red things, right? They're actually unique now. Whitebeard plays this vanilla style, you know, big dudes. Law does law things. Zoro is this more like low to the ground, rushy, control-y, playing lots of events, abusing the Marcos, but also like using things like Fire Fist and like Gordons and Buggies and like lots of these little dudes. And then Ace is obviously doing Ace things with these like hugely powerful events like Flame Emperor, being able to push massive damage, a lot more control-y, playing a lot more control tools in it. So you have these 4 genuinely like actually quite different decks in how they play, which adds a lot of nuance to the discussion. If you're not Katakuri. If you are Katakuri, you're just taking an L. And so the best deck in the game is losing to a huge proportion of the meta. So then you're in a situation where you're trying to decide between, you know, oh, well, what's good between the different red decks. And I would say consistency-wise, it's definitely Whitebeard. But power level-wise, matchup-wise, you're going to have a really easy time as a Law player into almost everything. You're beating a huge number of decks. Huge, 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 huge number of decks. Now, the problem for Law is the blue matchups, because if you are not going insanely fast, if Blue Croc makes it to 10 on, yeah, it's over. It's over. Like, if they can survive and stabilize at that, even on like 1 life, like if they survive to that point and they can slam the 10 cost Blue Kaido, and then they use their leader effect and your board is just gone, you are not going to be able to recover with sufficient aggro to overcome that. It's really, really, really hard. You've got to push hard, right? You've got to rush them down, which is why Blue Croc can struggle into things like Zoro. But into things like Whitebeard, it's absolutely free. Like Blue Croc eats it for breakfast. So the 2 best decks that counter Katakuri get really, really badly abused by Blue Croc, depending. Law is pretty 50-50, but Whitebeard is definitely disadvantageous. Then you've got, like, Rebecca in the format, which has a really, really impossible matchup into Blue Croc, a really tough matchup into Katakuri, but it can beat everything else, especially depending on the skill of the player, and it has a pretty advantageous matchup into something like Law. Okay, so now we've got this huge, weird triangle, pentagon, all sorts of nonsense happening here. Then you throw Nami into the mix, which if the Rebecca player doesn't know what they're doing, will always lose. Or like any stall deck is going to lose to the Nami player. You know, like Nami is something that really can cook if you are a good player. It's a relatively high skill cap deck. You need a lot of practice on it. You need to understand different matchups and how to like properly maximize value, but it's certainly a good deck. I believe it went X1. I think it's on day 2 in the regionals. It's happening right now as I'm recording this. And then fundamentally, green purple Doffy. It's like sometimes you just can't beat it because it's just going to go 7 cost Luffy, 4 cost Uta, 7 cost Luffy, 4 cost Uta, 7 cost Luffy, 4 cost Uta, 10 cost Doffy, 10 cost Doffy, 10 cost Doffy, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, I guess I die then. And it can be really, really hard to deal with. So you have this huge, like, yeah, and then of course there's purple, which just inexplicably seems to have really good matchups into yellow and red. So you have this really, really difficult decision in what to play. And all I can say for sure that I would never play in this format is Katakuri, because it is definitely statistically the worst deck you can take in terms of just expected matchups. Like, you're going to play 2-3 Laws, you're going to play 2-3 Whitebeards, you're just going to lose. You can play like 1 or 2 Rebeccas, you probably beat them, but you might not. So, like, you're just in this really awful situation. And I guess the point of this video was for me to vocalize this, just this little discussion on, like, where the meta is at. And now it's actually really quite interesting. And the fact that red has remained nerfed has actually not really done anything to the format. It has made Whitebeard less powerful. And therefore probably made Whitebeard less popular, but I don't think it's actually meaningfully affected like win rates, really. So I think that's why, in my opinion, the cards should most of them should come back. I don't know, maybe you can leave Radbeam, but like hit or whatever. But like, I don't think 9-beard's a massive deal. I don't think 4-cost Blocker Marker is a massive deal, right? Like these sorts of things. So yeah, it's just a really interesting format, and I want to know what you guys think. I want to see what you think in the comments down below about this format. What decks are you expecting to do good? And I'll also say this is a prime format for some rogue shit to just go crazy, right? Like, we've seen these random purple decks topping. We've seen all sorts of random stuff. Like, because people are so entrenched into this Katakuri lore, Whitebeard, Zoro, those are the big 4. There's a lot of Rebecca too, but frankly, a lot of the Rebecca's are just going to be on bottom tables because the deck is really, really hard to play, and also you can just lose. Like, you just get blown out if you just play like a bunch of Katakuri in a row. Like, okay, cool, guess I lose. So it's not necessarily the best pick either. So I think there's a lot of potential for random other XG. You'll notice green here basically not represented, right? And I will say Film Kid I think has a really good matchup into most of the meta. I think it's really quite scary into most of the format. So that's something that people I really, you know, should be aware of. So I'm going to go ahead and chuck it in here. It's entirely possible that Kinemon can also do some cooking. Entirely possible. I think if you look at what it does, like fundamentally, like that is actually quite good into the current format. A lot of aggro you get. I will say, into Katakuri, really tough, because they are just going to cut 8-cost Katakuri Odin, and then you're quite sad. But, you know, outside of that, whatever. Yeah, I just think there's a lot of potential for a lot of the leaders that are not really seeing that much play at the moment. For example, like Yerple. I definitely think it's arguably just worse Katakuri, but I think it is actually quite good. And the same with Blurple as well. I think there's lots of potential here. I just want to hear what you guys think. So if you enjoyed this video, if you've been full of rambles, please do like it, subscribe to the channel for more One Piece card game content. There'll be more guides and all that sort of stuff coming out soon. Deck profiles, of course. And yeah, I hope to see you guys in the next video. Cheers.